Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of an incredible talk show brought to you by the Indian Football Board. Today we have with us a coach who has completed his UEFA AFC A and UEFA Elite Youth A license. He is also a qualified personal trainer. He is the ex-Tata Football Academy, Bosco and Mahogany FC coach. He is the head of youth development at Bengaluru FC. He was the ex-head of player development at AIFF and head coach of Bengaluru United in the I-League second division. I'm glad to welcome Mr. Richard Hood. Hi, Richard. How are you doing?
All well. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so happy to have you over here. So, Ryan, you can take it ahead now.
Great. Now, me being a coach, I'm envious of the CV that Richard sir has. In the few years that I've known about Richard sir, he's probably one of the most brainy coaches around, and that's evident with the books that are in the background. So, Richard sir, again, thanks for accepting our invitation for this interview.
All glad to be on, Ryan.
Great. So, Archit had mentioned that you're a qualified personal trainer. So
not really. I don't know where he got that from, but I was going to sort of step in and correct over there. But no, not a qualified personal trainer.
All right, you have done work in strength and conditioning, if I'm not mistaken.
Not really.
Okay, all right, because that was something that we had seen on the research, but no worries.
Okay.
Now you're one of the most qualified coaches in India with your UEFA Elite Youth A diploma, UEFA A, AFC A. You have also got an interesting master's in high performance football coaching. So, were you always academically involved? Were you an academician, or did it just happen after you got into the game?
Definitely right after I got into the game. I think throughout school, I absolutely struggled, whether it was the 10th and 12th standard boards and things. It was always a big barrier. I wasn't sort of interested in any of those subjects and things. And I stopped studying after 12th. I mean, I tried to get into doing my bachelor's and stuff. And I mean, there were 2-3 attempts, but that never really materialized. But I think I was lucky to do my initial coaching courses in Singapore, where I mean, the sort of people I was sharing the classroom with, there was a lot more academic involvement over there. It was a good peer group in terms of pushing me to have a lot more, let's say, learned approach to the game. I think a lot of people, they read a lot. So I think a lot of the habits that got me into pushing for the academic side of the game was built with the sort of people I shared the classroom with in Singapore, and that sort of culture rubbed off on me. So I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened in India. I'm sure there would have been a lot of classmates who would have inspired me, but I started quite early. I think I was 19, 20 then, and looking for examples and role models, and there were plenty as far as that aspect of the game went.
And a lot of your academic, all your intelligence has been used in the youth sector of football in India. So what are your thoughts on the current youth development setup in the country, and do you have any ideas on how to enhance it?
That's a 3-hour chat and things, but yeah, I mean, something that's really close to my heart, especially after spending whole decade in the youth sector and things. And by and large, I don't feel I'm in a position to sort of recommend what can be done, what cannot be done, because right now there are big gaps, especially in terms of how the game is played, how early it is introduced, just the general culture towards the sport and things. And I feel at least in terms of the age at which we bring the kids into the game, the sort of experiences we give them, them experiencing a 8 to 10 month long calendar, getting those 30-40 games per season, obviously age appropriate, right? I mean, you don't play 11 at 5, 6, 7 years old and things, but I feel that's where the biggest gaps are, because one point is doing all these courses and traveling as much as I have across Asia and Europe, trying to see what exactly the difference is. It is the quantity of interaction that the kids get, as in just real interaction in the games, competing week in and week out. I think that's where the biggest difference is, because I mean, just look at the calendar. It's about 8 to 10 games if you're lucky in most places, especially at the school level and otherwise. And we have a direct example of what volume of experience goes into creating good football players and good cricketers in the country. You look at the life of a cricketer in the country, somebody who's aspiring to make it to the national team. That's proper high performance sort of development setup right there. I mean, it's competitive, it's real. You don't the standards are so incredibly high, and a lot of those factors go missing. And intellectually, if you're asking, or let's say you kept using the word intelligent, there's really not much over there. I think I spent 3 years with the federation trying to figure out where exactly the gaps were, and let's just say the gaps start quite visibly at the under 16 levels when we go into the Asian level competitions to play, and that sort of multiplies. So I think to qualify for the Senior World Cup, which usually is the aspiration for, let's say, anybody coming to the game and investing time and resources into football, especially from the development point of view. Everybody has that aspiration there, but we don't really seem to have the patience. As in, we like to go from one 4-year plan to another 4-year plan and live through 20 years of chasing the dream, rather than having something concrete across 20 years and committing to that, as in building year by year. So I mean, we have I mean, there's no sort of process orientation right over there in terms of giving these kids a upbringing that is in sync with what's happening in other countries. So we have a lot of boxes to tick. We have coach education in place, we have a youth league in place, but what's happening at the local level, what's happening from the very early age groups, that's a big gap that we can't really make up for. So yeah, I mean, that's one aspect where I think where we like how early we start and how much football we play. It's a big factor.
Right, that's quite an interesting perspective. And what if someone asked you what your coaching style and philosophy is? What would that be?
Philosophy, we have a game model that is quite well defined. That is, we, as in the coaching staff I was last with. So we want our players to be expressive. We want to play good, attractive football, and obviously intensity comes in before anything else. Whether it is in the defensive phases or attacking phases, we like to problem solve really quickly. So as soon as we win the ball, first instance is to go forward and attack or look for the best way forward and things. I mean, possession with a little bit of purpose, with the intent of breaking down. I mean, going through the thirds. Also, the way we attack, it's not really direct football. Our first objective is to get the ball to the final third, get the ball into the box, and then look for the final pass and things. So, in attacking terms, that's the sort of game that we keep promoting. And defensively, yes, we want to win it back really quickly. So, if you're asking in, let's say, short sentence, yeah, we like to impose a good, urgent, intense style of play, and work very hard towards it in terms of executing it at good speed and demanding a lot from the players to do that for 90 minutes.
That's great. That's great. And I was fortunate to have done a seminar under you at Cooperage, Bombay, where you had mentioned about the chemical myelin. So, in your mind, for all the youth coaches that are watching, how much of an effect does myelin have on players picking up new techniques?
I think myelin, one is we need to understand the dynamics that create it, as in what, let's just say that insulating a skill circuit, that is what the mind perceives and what the body reacts to, what sort of actions you play out. Myelin, or let's just say skill requires a challenge, it requires a little bit of stress, skill requires repetition under stress, skill requires repetition under variation. So those things you get only in a game format or in a duel, let's say, or in a small-sided game, or whatever the approach might be. The other bit with myelin, unfortunately, is that it rapidly stops producing itself after a certain age. And that is 12, 13, 14, you don't really get as much of, let's say, time with producing that skill chemical or creating those reactions that give you these permanent skills that make you high performing problem solver, let's say, as a player. So, I mean, all these things, they get cemented down from a very early age. So if you look at a lot of these clips of top-notch football players, and you get their clips of when they were 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, it's still the same skills, as in the way Messi was dribbling in Rosario, or what Iniesta was doing at a very young age, or what Phil Foden was doing at the ages of 9, 10, 11. The way they move with the ball, the way they control the ball, all the, let's say, the characteristics and traits, all of those were built at a very young age. And the talent got a pathway through Barcelona, through Man City, or whichever club it is. But the bulk of the development is done from the early ages, and then the clubs come in. I mean, the academy system takes the best talent. They don't necessarily develop the skills. I think the skills are developed in a, let's say, the autonomous manner. There's really no skill for teaching Messi how to dribble past 4, 5 players the way he does. It's something that he aspire towards developing as a part of his game, as a part of his repertoire, or something that gives him those bragging rights when he played with his friends or played as a 6, 7, 8 years old. And if you look at those clips again, you see how early it all starts. You look at Iniesta controlling the ball. I mean, these are examples that I've seen extensive footage of, thanks to YouTube and certain feeds that keep coming up on Twitter and things. So, I mean, it gets cemented down at a very early age, and then your job as a youth coach is to guide it. But if we're talking about skill development, whoever's working in the grassroots, by the old definition, that is 6 to 12 years old, you need to give the kids license and then let them know that certain skills, there's a faster way of doing it. So if at all they're dribbling, you need to execute it. What after executing the skill? So as in, you build a model for these players to aspire towards, as in, can you be better at this? And you give them the tools to skill pretty much are tools, right? I mean, when you're faced with a situation, you come up with either a pass or a dribble or a shot or whatever the various R's of football are to problem solve. So one is if you're going to think that you're going to develop skills by training passively, by just repetition for the sake of repetition, if that's what's going to give you skills, or you feel that there is engagement, but there really isn't any much sort of engagement because the kids are doing something. So, I mean, one big factor of this whole myelin bit is you need to create stresses in the head, as in put the kids into various situations over and over again to come up with the same bit, and they'll figure it out. As in, you need to be an enabler of skill to come through, as in you see them working towards something, maybe compliment them a lot more when it's not really the end product yet. As in, a lot of times we can kill creativity, we can kill let's say curiosity of players to dive into and adapt new skills, especially at those age groups, right? I mean, 6 to 12, who is working on it on a day-to-day basis. And because the seasons are so short, we chase results so much. We want them to do what we want them to do. As in, as coaches, we want to take ownership of their decisions, ownership of their skill repertoire and things. And which is why I think most of the kids that develop quietly when they're playing with their friends on the streets and things like that. The adult usually comes in there and ruins everything, as in this autonomy and let's say this quest for mastery of doing something, because there are no manuals for half of these skills out there, right? I mean, how do you perfect Zidane spin or step overs and things like that? All these things come with experimentation. As in, a kid wants to perfect himself towards it, and he keeps applying it till it sort of clicks and works. So I think, yeah, you need to give autonomy and space for kids to express themselves, teach them how to be curious, what are other skills, give them options, give them examples. And obviously, all of this under good, let's say, convenience stresses. As in, it cannot be too difficult where the kids don't want to try the skill ever again. And it cannot be too easy where you don't develop those sort of connections in the head. So myelin pretty much creates these connections. Okay, I've got a 1v1 now. Last time ball got tackled off me, maybe I'll pass this time. But if you have those repetitions where you're very successful at dribbling from a young age, that becomes part of your permanent playing memory. So in the future, when you come up with the same situation, when you're 18, 25, 35 years old, you go back to what you were taught at, let's say, 6 to 13, as in when those connections are being strengthened in the head. So, I mean, it's better that coaches obviously read about it, understand it, and then maybe they will come up with much more informed training sessions, not sessions, but a much more informed approach towards skill development, keeping the whole neurology factor of it in mind.
Right, and you've also worked with, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of players at 16 and 17 who may not have been as technically developed as they should be during at that age. And nearly every coach in India probably finds that. So what approach do you take there? Like if you have to, develop an under 18 team, for example?
I think one is your whole man management skills start right there. I mean, we keep hearing a lot about it with the older age groups and things. But scripting what you've got right now to giving, or let's just say not scripting, but scripting your whole optimizing of skill approach, right? I mean, if I know that you as Ryan are limited in speed but high in skill, I'm going to use you to the best of your abilities and not really start finger pointing and telling you this is where you lack, this is where you lack, this is where you lack, don't do this, don't do that. As in the whole encouragement factor in terms of getting players to see possibilities, getting players to see how best they can apply themselves. And more than anything else, you create a compensatory model as well. As in you're training everybody with a good collective approach, right? Okay, you know that whenever he has the ball, I expect you to do X, Y, and Z. As in collective understanding of each other's limitations and strengths. When he gets the ball, he's going to charge down the wing. So I need to make sure somebody is there in the box. So you create a good sense of cohesion by doing that, as in maximizing whatever we have right now. Because it's easy to put the kid on the bench or constantly keep pointing out his limitations, and then when match day comes, you're like, "Bhai, today you have to really work hard for me." And after putting the kid down for about 3-4 months, you've got 2 suspensions or an injury, and that kid needs to show up. So I think you need to be very careful, because even after the age of 16, 17, kids surprise you. I mean, you'll have enough instances where you thought that the talent was going absolutely nowhere at the age of 16, 17, but 18, 19, 20, you suddenly see them exploding onto the scene. And that's happened a lot with me as well, as in guys who weren't doing much at the age of the 16, suddenly they surprise you once the whole physicality and all those things catch up, provided they're not age cheats, right? Because then it sort of interrupts it. And then you never know when everything comes together. When that kid gets that spark to sort of apply everything falls into place, and then you get the performer that you see at the professional level. So, I mean, since you said if you're putting a under 18 team together, you've got these people who are limited in skill. I think that's sort of insight that is up to the coach, as in it's not really for the player to know all these things. You just need to figure ways out of maximizing, optimizing whatever they've got for the sake of the team. And then obviously, like I said, the whole collective cohesion thing, everybody learns to work with each other and produce a good brand of football. So, or your brand of football, or your model of how you want to achieve success on the pitch, or what your interpretation or perception of success is. You have to do it with your players, and be very, very, I mean, encouragement, awareness, all of these things play a big part in utilizing limitations, let's say, technically, or even other aspects of performance.
Right there, these are some practical solutions to some real problems that you're giving, and I think this is going to be a great reference point for many coaches. I'm going to combine two questions into one. We have been speaking about youth football so far, but you went into senior team football. Now, the first thing I'd want to know is the difference between youth team and adult football, and the second thing is that the moment you took over Bengaluru United, there was this professional approach that the club took in whatever they did. And in all honesty, the Bengaluru United setup was probably better than many I League setups. So how did all this come about? And of course, what's the difference between youth and adult football?
Youth and adult, I mean, it's night and day almost with the sort of personalities and ambitions that you're dealing with, because youth, it's a lot more open-ended. I mean, the world's at your feet, and kids don't realize what the actual realities are waiting for them, because not everybody makes it. So let's just say you have a group of really, really talented under 20 kids or under 18 kids or under a age group criteria. Everybody has this a bit of ambition in them that if I work hard today and I will make it. Everybody's trying to figure out the contract or job appointment, government, whatever it may be. So it's a lot more, let's say, the collective is a lot more optimistic, one, a lot more ambitious too. But in senior, you get a lot of guys who figured their way out, as in they know where exactly they fit in, they know what the targets are. I mean, they figure out their brand of competitism, they figure out their brand of what it takes to be a teammate and things. So I think as a coach, it demands a lot more on the personal management side, rather than personal managing these people and understanding where exactly they've come from or what exactly they're looking for in their attachment with you. So yeah, that's one major difference, because in youth, I think it's a lot easier to sort of get everybody to pull in the same direction. You can do a lot of experiments with the changes just to give people playing time and things. But at the senior level, it's ruthless. You go through many games without making any changes because you are chasing a result, and possibly don't accommodate personal aspirations, right? I mean, youth, you know that kids hasn't got playing time in the last couple of games, so you use him just for the sake of using him, and obviously to impact the football that you're playing as well. But yeah, major difference is dealing with the personalities and things. And also, I'm not saying that it's more or less in terms of accountability and stuff, but at the senior level, you are responsible for a lot of factors in terms of delivering success, as in everything is about winning. I mean, no matter what anybody says, what the underlying or read between the line bits are, senior football is about winning, and you need to figure that out. So how you go about it, you can play a bad match and win, and play a great match and lose. And but at the end of the day, or let's say even within a 24 cycle, nobody cares. Everybody looks at the scoreline, and that's something that you need to own, as in there's no hiding behind all of that. And if you're talking about the whole professional approach at Bengaluru United. One bit was that after 10 years of youth football and things, it was a very conscious decision to get into senior team football, right? So it wasn't that I just decided overnight. I'd committed an entire year to doing a high performance course in Portugal, understanding what exactly goes into running a professional team, as in working in a high performance setup and things, the importance of having a coaching staff, having processes in place, having departments in place, all of that. And it was only after that that I started creating a template in terms of how I would manage a team. And Bangalore United came in at a good time, as in it was 5 months after I'd left the federation to come in there and pitch this idea to them. And they were quite forthcoming with taking everything on board, right? From getting the appointments in place and approach to team development, recruitment, load management, the strength and conditioning side of it, and especially bringing in the best sort of the best people that were available to come in and fix that whole template about what it takes to create a team. So I don't know about them being better than a lot of I-League teams and things. I think that's an unfair comparison because the club is 4 years old and many teams have survived with what those perceived notions of unprofessionalism, or they don't know anything but still have survived for, let's say, a few decades and things. So I mean, that comparison always doesn't really hold well. But yeah, I mean, we've done our best to give our players a good day-to-day with the club, as in it's not just 2 hours of training. They come in, they have a good 4 to 6 hours together as a team, right from activation to the gym training session that take place later, or maybe a little bit of analysis and things. But we have a proper 4 to 6 hour working day. Any training day sort of stretches into that. We try and give a clear picture to them, the sort of planning that goes into it, the sort of detailing that goes into the day-to-day, the management of the day-to-day. All of those are very, very careful consideration, and we sort of challenge ourselves as well. That is the entire staff that we had. Professionalism isn't just about, let's say, paying salaries on time, which unfortunately is the baseline, let's say, for most clubs, that, oh, they're professional, they pay salaries on time and things. But it is about what's happening on a day-to-day and sort of culture and environment that you build. So yeah, there was a lot of work that has gone behind it, a lot of work that went into the everyday bits to produce whatever reputation the club has secured.
It's definitely a club that did things differently. And you have experienced, in terms of coach education, you have experienced the AFC pathway as well as the UEFA pathway. So are there any similarities, any differences? How would you compare the two?
I think I'm close to finishing 10 years with both the UEFA and AFC A, right? But it's the environment where you go ahead and apply the learnings. I mean, if you look at it from slide to slide, if you look at it from practical to practical, there really isn't that much of a difference. Possibly number one would be that, yes, I was surrounded by a lot more uh, experienced and let's say reputed people at the UEFA forum, as in the people who came in, and but that's a result of where I chose to do the course as well. So I mean, the challenges that are set by the participants itself, I feel, number one, because you get instructors probably come and put on these sample sessions, and then it's a lot more participant led and things for large parts. So you get good examples of what a good training session looks like. You converse with them, you interact with them, you get a very good idea of what professional football and what their day-to-day looks like. So I think that sort of fed in a lot. I think, and this is something that the AFC is moving towards, at least within the Indian context, that we make it a lot more practical oriented and a lot more assignment work oriented, because at the UEFA level, there were no written exams, there were no long lectures in the classroom and things. I think we spent a bulk of our time outside working on the pitch and things, and wherever they could use video resources, then they didn't go into the classroom. Wherever there were reading material that could cover up a topic, then we were expected to read and then produce an assignment based on what was given. So at least learning was ensured in different ways. So I think, and plus the duration was a lot longer. So the UEFA A license took me about a year and a half to finish, from the introductory bits to the assessment bits. And then you had these smaller modules. You had a lot more contact time, as in I had to travel to and fro quite a bit to fulfill the commitments. And I felt that really helped you, because you're not really stepping on the pedal for 28 days, start to finish, get your certificate, and then you're out of there. You're under pressure to sort of constantly prove that what is being taught, or what are the demands and expectations of the course, you're reproducing that on a And that, I mean, all the learnings or expected outcomes are visible in your competencies, in the way you talk about the game, and the way you are familiarizing yourself with the course outcomes. So you have a longer time period and more frequent interactions to fulfill that. So that's where I saw a major difference, because contact time wise, it was a lot lesser than what was happening at the AFC level, the UEFA bit, but the duration of the course is a lot longer. So you're living with the course expectations for a few months as opposed to just 28 days, and that's changed in India, thankfully. As in, even the A license now is divided across modules, and it's a lot more demanding. People have to go back, produce coursework, complete assignments and things. So yeah, it's a lot more in sync with what's happening at the UEFA level, at least off late. But like I said, the environment, the guys who I did the UEFA badges with, they had a 40-week season. They had a 10-month long season. They had access to these guys 4 to 5 times a week. So if you just add it up, let's say it's been 10 years since those guys have got, let's say 40 games per year minimum. They have 400 games experience under the belt. But comparatively, if I'm working with 10, 12, 18, 20 games per year for the same period, I'm behind in terms of experience. And those games come in really tiny windows, 10 games in 6 weeks. Well, for them, 10 games in 10 weeks and whatever. So just the environment is what produces the competency. Because there's enough and more A licenses, pro licenses out there, but very few that sort of survive. And the more you're tested, I think the more opportunities to prove yourself and cement your game style, or whatever reason you are getting into football coaching goes. So I think minute our calendar improves, our calendar sort of becomes as long as extensive and demanding as, let's say, what's happening in Iran, Korea, Japan, then we'll see the fruits of our coach education efforts as well, as in what's exactly coming. But right now it's a bit too intermittent and too much too little, as in not enough happening across the year to sort of produce good coaches. And that includes me as well.
Well said. And most coaches, it's no secret, their aim is to complete the A license. You're a A license coach yourself, and you're a license coach educator. What is the experience like at a license course? And also, are there any topics what are some interesting topics that are covered on those courses?
I haven't been on coaching courses for a couple of years now, and then the part of instructing on the A license, it was also due to the whole AFC convention coming through. Since I was helping out Savio with developing the course content and things. That's how I got included in being involved in the course day to day. But yeah, I mean, if you're asking what are the interesting topics, there were changes in terms of the approach to it with what was being done earlier. We now have phases of play, principles through the thirds and things, which will take quite a bit of time to explain. But by and large, we're trying to get it as close to the game as possible. As in, even if you trickle down the numbers and things, the challenge for A license coaches is how quickly can they create a game situation without really outlining a specific problem. And the challenge is in the design of the exercise or design of the training activity that's going on. Not overtly 1v1 shooting and finishing and things, but let's say the entire process of you take the principles of the game, how are you applying them in a sequential manner to create the solution that you want, and then organizing the opponents in a way to create the problems that you want. So I think the assessments, they last for about 20 minutes and things, and that's where we see the biggest sort of difference. As in, if coaches have gone back between the modules and applied it, when they come back, then we see, okay, they're a lot better at scripting the starting picture. As in, I want 8 players here, 6 players there, 2 players standing as neutrals, whatever it may be. As in, you start to see that they're thinking about it in the way that we would want them to. As in, how quickly can you get towards creating that situation and then providing problem-solving opportunities to the players that you're coaching. So I think, yeah, that's one approach that I think has changed a lot compared to what I'd undergone earlier. And again, like I said, it's the A license compared to the CB is a lot more game oriented, 11-11, a lot more tactically oriented, as in how you're organizing your lines of players and things, and what is the purpose behind it. You need to have a reason. It's not just about playing 4-3-3 versus 4-4-2. What is the choice of tactics, as in what's driven that? Do you have the players to pull off whatever you sort of conceive in your head to do? So those are challenges that come up for participants as well. So yeah, I mean, it's if you have a good open mindset towards things, then it's a good experience and sort of pressure environment to put yourself through.
Really well explained. It sounds exciting for sure. And in the ISL, recently Khalid Jamil made news becoming the first Indian head coach, and now you have Mr. Derek Pereira. What, in your view, what are the steps one can take to improve on that record, having more Indians as head coaches in the top division?
One is the awareness that neither of them did it overnight, right? I mean, Khalid has been with Mumbai FC right in the beginning. He's put in his time. He's got all those reps in, like training session after training session, season after season, game after game. So it isn't something that happened overnight or suddenly. So there were no flukes over there for sure, or just somebody who's sort of dropped in from the sky and landed it. So one is that people need to be aware of what was the pathway in terms of securing that. Derek also was. But he is a very reputed technician in our game. I think when I first got into coaching, he was amongst the first coaches that we looked to for his professionalism. He was quite outspoken in terms of how exactly to go about it, and very open to having guys like me around and discussing coaching. I mean, it wasn't extensive, but at least the doors were open to come and watch him train and things. So this I'm talking all the way back to about 12 years now, 12, 13 years ago at Chogle College. Them being around. So one is that you can't really get into it. I mean, you're doing your DNC that someday I'm going to become an ISL coach or become an I-League coach and things. I mean, obviously it's great to have goals and objectives, but if you don't have a step-by-step approach towards doing it, and also to understand there are not going to be any shortcuts. I mean, people who might be under the impression that I will assist for 5 years and then I'll get the job automatically, it doesn't work that way, because players talk about you, people are watching you all the time, even if you're just taking the warm-up part of it. So to have a very intentional approach in terms of being good at whatever little bits that you get, that's what builds competencies, not just being around or being seen. That's not way of sort of building competencies. So one is that, I mean, if you're asking about coaches getting to it, I mean, whatever little opportunities you get, make sure you're doing your absolute best at maximizing it, whether it's just the warm up or the passing drill in the beginning, or that's what gives you more trust. Then tomorrow they'll trust you with the small side game before they take over. So this whole thing of, let's say you share 10 units of a training session, and when you first get in, you only trust with the first 2 units of it. As you build your trust, and becomes 4 and 5, and then you have to be really, really aware and mindful about what's happening with the other parts. Where else can you chip in? Can you chip in with the other team? Can you chip in with timely insights into what's happening on the bench during the game? If there's any crucial thing that the head coach might have missed and things. So you need to be eyes and ears and do it in a very selfless way, because everything counts, as in you build a track record of everything that you do. And most important bit is that whatever you do right now is going to pay off 10 years later. There isn't anything in terms of immediate gratification in coaching, unfortunately. I mean, you can't really expect things to turn overnight and stuff. So, I mean, you need to be very mindful of all your efforts, good or bad, will sort of come back and catch up with you a few years later, and nobody forgets. So, yeah, you need to have a very sincere approach to get to where Khalid and Derek have gotten now. And yeah, I mean, we need to watch them carefully now. One is to see where exactly they've done very well. And then more importantly, if we get the job, what would we do differently, as in what would our approach be, and being quite mindful about that. So you need to listen to interviews of the Indian coaches. You need to read a lot more about what they've said in the past. What are they saying right now? Try and understand the coaches' interviews. I mean, the player insights as well, as in obviously Khalid has got the job now, but you need to sort of peek into what the players are saying about him during the Aizwal days when he won the I-League, that whole our whole Leicester City chapter in Indian football and things that he pulled off. And you need to look at that as a catapult moment to sort of see where he is today. Derek didn't get this job without winning titles. I mean, he is a title-winning coach. He was a coach who finished in the top 3 of the table for about 4-5 years consistently with Pune FC. So it's not just about having a job. You need to excel to get these opportunities. So you need to understand what excellence went behind it as well, rather than saying that, okay, from I-League to ISL, that's not the progression. You need to get into the I-League, big step over, then do really, really well at the I-League level, and then will you sort of catch the attention of people who might trust you with more resources and a better platform to sort of show your skills competencies as a coach. So yeah, it's not a linear thing, as in I'll do what Khalid did or I'll do what Derek did. You need to sort of excel in your own way.
Right. Perseverance is key.
Yeah.
And now you're a professional coach, it's known that as a professional coach, the schedules are very erratic. You're not sure when you're going to eat, when you're going to sleep. How do you balance? How do you get a balance between your work life, your family life, and your leisure?
There's a good research that had come out about few years ago about serial winning coaches and things. And one part is that you need to bite the bullet and accept that for large part of the season, this whole balance thing really doesn't add up, because everything sort of sits at the top of your head, or back of your head, or whatever it is. I mean, there's no escaping, let's say, the intensity of a season and things. So, I mean, in the very whatever limited context that I present, from the BDFA League to I League qualifiers and I League 2 and things, I don't think pressure has a brand in terms of what you don't know what it's like at the Premier League level or ISL level. Pressure is pressure. You're accountable for the job that you do, and if you are very, very serious about it, you own that pressure and things. So the balance thing, I guess you need to accept it. I mean, if it's at the top of your head, one is you need to have the right sort of people around you. Number one, that starts with the staff. So guys like Mangi, Chelston, Satish, all these guys that really sort of shared the pressure in terms of wherever it came in. So you need to surround yourself with good people. On the personal side, very, very careful consideration about who your life partner is. I mean, do they understand what the game is about? Are they accommodating to the sort of erratic mood swings and whatever it is? Because it's very difficult to sort of leave the job at home and then come and be very balanced in the personal life, and then because a defeat is a defeat, a disappointment is disappointment, and obviously the upsides of winning and getting success on the pitch, even that has a very let's say positive carry on or ripple effect into the whole environment. But managing the whole thing, yes, you need to have emotional balance. You can't really let yourself go, because what you do today, you need to face your players tomorrow. So let's say you say things that you haven't, what you shouldn't have said in the spur of the moment, or reacted or behaved in a way that you didn't when your emotions were on edge. That sort of catches up with you tomorrow. People remember that, and then there's no repairing that. So like I said, one thing is knowing that the balance equation is out of it, but also a huge element of self-control, self-awareness, knowing what your bad points are, avoiding conversations that really don't need to happen in that moment in time, knowing exactly how to temper your conversations, temper your behavior, reading into the dressing room as well, as in what exactly the mood is. Do you sense overconfidence? Do you sense lack of confidence? Do you sense, whatever it is, I mean, you need to be tuned in, you need to be you need to be present, you need to be connected with whatever is going on. So I think that's where the whole, you're committed, man. I mean, like when the season is going on, you're committed 24/7. There really isn't so much of a hostage. As soon as you get into the work pit, you just are sort of tuned in. There's no real off switch over there, and you never really know what's going to hit you. So being self-aware and having a sense of emotional control, I think those two factors play a big part. And I'm not saying that you need to have a calm face. I mean, you are allowed to let go and behave in certain ways and things, but yeah, there is a huge element of being appropriate also, doing things that need to be done as well, and not really I think, yeah, being authentic. If you're asking for one small bit, then don't try and imitate anybody. That this coach never reacts to these sort of things. If a part of you is to behave in a certain way and react in a certain way, because yeah, that's one thing that players read through, right? If you're being fake and it's not really part of your character or personality, then that's something that people see through straight away, especially in pressure situations where you're going out of your own character traits and trying to be somebody who you're not. So yeah, I mean, if you're authentic, a bit more accepting about the demands of the job, it becomes a good sort of career to be engaged in.
Right, and talking about authenticity, I won't be taking too much of your time. Today is a sad day in Indian football because we have come to know about the passing away of one of the most authentic coaches there was, the legend Mr. Subhash Bhaumik. So, do you have anything to say about it?
I remember this really old Sports Star article, right? I think I was in school then. And this was the article about, I think it was World Cup time, and the same old question about why doesn't India qualify for the World Cup? And I think they sort of tried to make fun of him. They said he used the word physics while he meant physique and things. But then the whole line of comments that followed up beyond that, about him talking about Indian players just not being robust enough, as not having professionalism. We don't eat properly. We don't train properly. all of those factors as in why exactly we lag behind. So, I mean, throughout I've known him to be a very honest person. I think whenever there were crises or perceived crises in Indian football, he's always had a big voice to sort of speak out. You speak to players who've been with him, they're not so much about the tactics side or the training management side, but they told you like he was a pure fighter, as in he would walk into the boardroom and demand whatever that was needed. He ensured that the players got good hotels. He ensured that they got good nutrition and food, good allowances when they went on away tours and things. So that way, I mean, he was a player's player. I mean, player's coach in terms of keeping the motivation up. And I think enough and more about his ability to sort of inspire halftime talks and things, very real, very to the point. And yeah, I mean, I'm just recalling now, like since you've posed the question and things, but obviously when somebody goes, you remember a lot of the positives, and these are the first ones that come to mind, that at least as the person he is authentic and did everything he could to sort of improve the player's status. Wherever he went, I think that's one thing that players always talk about, the quality of life in terms of where they were staying, what they were eating, how they traveled, all of that sort of jumped up. And I mean, that's a big sort of compliment to him, because very rarely do coaches think about those things, right? I mean, you have so much of a budget, and to convince the owners to just keep the team happy and maintain a good motivational environment, we sort of downplay that or don't understand how to go about it. But I mean, I think he's over the years given a great example of what it's like to be a good leader and man manager.
We've had the good fortune of being able to interview Mr. Bhaumik on this.
Oh, nice.
platform.
Okay.
Yes, so we've been very lucky that.
What was it like though?
It was amazing. He's, as you mentioned, authenticity. He said things the way it was, and yes, it's available. It's available on our channel. We'd be happy to share the link with you for sure.
Please look forward
Yes,
to going through
and
that for sure.
Richard, yep, and Richard sir, this was an amazing time for me, especially because I am primarily a coach, and it was a big learning experience for me with the answers that you gave, the thought-provoking views that you have. And yes, overall it was fantastic. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as a.
Keep doing
I'd
what
say
you're doing,
everyone.
Ryan. Sorry to interrupt, but I mean, I followed you. I don't know since when. I think it's been really long since we connected on LinkedIn many years ago. I think you've written emails a long time back, and to see how far you've come. And I keep telling people about your interpersonal skills and things, especially during the work you did for AIFC and things during the, I think the refreshers and stuff that we had. I think those courses that were developed. So just the delivery skills and all of that, I mean, it's good to see nice, bright guys like you coming forward and sort of taking this whole career approach very seriously. I see you to be very entrepreneurial as well in terms of whatever you've built around your name. So congrats on all the success that you've had, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Richard sir. Thanks for the kind words. And Achis is just going to conclude the interview.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Richard sir, for your time. Now, me being a youth coach, I definitely learned a few things from you. And I hope I can implement them successfully when I go on the field. And just like me, I'm sure many of audience members who are coaches, who are players, they will try to implement it in their game as well. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you, Ryan, for conducting this amazing interview. It was good to have you over here. Thanks a lot.
Yes, guys. Thank you.